You begin in the soft, grey-blue calm of an early Mediterranean morning. The kind of morning that feels as if it forgot to set its own alarm. A faint breeze drifts through an olive grove, cool and a little salty, hinting at the distant sea. Birds wake before you do, chattering in the branches with the energy of creatures who have absolutely no rent due. You blink, stretch, and feel the slow weight of sunlight warming your eyelids. And somewhere, just beyond this peaceful stillness, waits the story of how Rome, young, stubborn, overly ambitious Rome managed to defeat Greece, a civilization so iconic it practically invented the word iconic. But that comes later. Right now, you breathe in, feel the earth beneath your sandals, and listen to a world that hasn't yet realized it's about to be conquered. You take a few steps through the grove, olives crunching softly underfoot. The smell is herbal and earthy, thick enough you could almost spread it on bread. A shepherd passes in, the distance, leading a small herd of goats who seem to be arguing loudly about absolutely nothing. You're not sure what the argument is about, but one goat is clearly losing. This is your first gentle hint that the ancient world, for all its marble statues and heroic tales, it was full of daily irritations and background noise, humble details that make history feel a little more like life, and a little less like the world's most stressful museum. A soft, wry voice in the back of your mind reminds you, you probably won't make it through this day. Not because anything dangerous is coming, but because surviving the ancient world generally required a skill set that included patience for bureaucratic chaos and tolerance for questionable sandals. Still, you continue walking as though you belong here. As the sun rises, you hear the low rumble of distant movement traders heading toward a nearby settlement, pushing carts filled with pottery, cloth, bronze tools, and exactly one mysterious sack that jiggles in a way you choose not to investigate. The major fact of this peaceful morning, though you don't know it yet, is that Rome's eventual domination of Greece began not with a single battle, but with decades of increasing contact, trade, diplomacy, frustration, admiration, and the occasional heated argument about who invented theatre. You pass a weathered stone boundary marker carved with ancient Greek letters. The inscription says something poetic about the land and the gods, but it also includes a line politely warning you not to graze goats here. A reminder that even the ancients were dealing with zoning regulations. One obscure tidbit: many Greek border stones doubled as informal public message boards, where people left small notes, offerings, or very occasionally passive-aggressive comments about their neighbors. Humanity has always been consistent. As you follow the dusty path, you notice the first hints of cultural blending. A Roman merchant trudges by, wearing a Greek-style cloak but Roman sandals that look like someone tried to design footwear using only geometry and wishful thinking. He nods politely, and you nod back, feeling for a moment how the two worlds, Rome and Greece, were intertwining long before either side admitted it. Historians still debate whether this early phase of contact was more cooperative or more begrudging, but the truth likely sits somewhere in the middle, sipping wine and rolling its eyes. You find yourself approaching a small coastal village, waking from sleep. You hear pottery clink, fishermen grumble cheerfully, and the sea sigh as waves brush the shore. Smoke rises from cooking fires, soft, comforting, scented faintly with herbs that would make even a modern chef take notes. A woman sweeps her doorway with the kind of determination that suggests the dust has personally offended her. You pause and take in the scene, the sounds, the warmth, the gentle imperfections that make the world feel lived in. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the early heartbeat of a story. Larger than empires, a story about pride, ambition, culture, and the strange ways people influence one another without meaning to. Before we go further, let me gently remind you, if you're enjoying this quiet wander through the ancient world, feel free to like the video. It genuinely helps more sleepy travelers find their way here. And if you feel called to, tell me your location and the current time in the comments below. It's always comforting to see where everyone is drifting in from. Now take a slow breath. Let your shoulders drop. Let the distant waves wash over your thoughts. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. You walk along the village's shoreline, where the sea laps gently at smooth stones, each one polished by centuries of waves that never asked permission. The morning light grows warmer, slipping across the surface in gold ribbons. You can feel the humidity settle softly on your skin, a reminder that Mediterranean mornings like to warm up slowly, as though hitting snooze a few times before committing to the day. A small fishing boat bumps against the dock, tied with a rope so frayed it looks like it's holding on out of sheer optimism. Two fishermen unload baskets of wriggling silver fish, debating loudly about which one of them forgot to bring the good net. Their argument, despite its volume, has a strange musical quality. Greek, when spoken passionately, often sounds like someone reading poetry while trying not to spill soup. As you continue walking, you pass a young man carving a small figure from wood. The curls of shavings cluster at his feet like thin ribbons. He glances up and gives a half smile, the universal expression of, "I'm pretending not to notice you staring at my work." The figurine itself appears to be Hermes, though his nose is suspiciously crooked. A light breeze swirls the shaving curls across the ground, turning the scene into a tiny wooden snowstorm. The major historical fact woven quietly into this peaceful setting is that Greek cities across the Mediterranean had been planting colonies for centuries long before Rome became powerful enough to care. These colonies weren't empires in the dramatic marching armies sense. They were more like extended family members who moved to another region but still came home for holidays. Their presence meant Greek culture spread naturally. Language, myths, pottery styles, and the gentle art of arguing about philosophy for 6 hours straight. You turn toward the hills, following a narrow dirt path framed by low stone walls. A donkey stands beside one of them, staring at you with the judgmental intensity of an animal who has seen too many humans make poor decisions. You give it a respectful nod, because donkeys remember everything, and you'd prefer not to be on its list. As you climb, the village hum fades, replaced by chirping cicadas and the soft rustle of olive branches. You get the sense that this landscape has watched thousands of years of human ambition quietly, steadily, without ever rushing to take sides. In the distance, on a hilltop, you notice the remains of an old watchtower. Only part of the structure still stands, its stones stacked like a half-finished thought. One obscure tidbit. Many Greek communities built these small towers, not primarily for defense, but as signaling posts, early warning systems that use smoke by day and fire by night, like an ancient group chat with terrible bandwidth. You reach a bend in the trail and find a small Roman camp set up on the opposite slope. Nothing dramatic, just a few tents, a makeshift kitchen, and two soldiers attempting to fix a cart whose wheel has the stability of wet bread. One soldier mutters something about how Greek roads are too narrow, while the other insists Roman wheels are too wide. This is your first quiet glimpse of the cultural tension simmering beneath the surface. Admiration mixed with irritation, curiosity mixed with superiority, the way two clever children might compete over who gets to speak first. Historians still debate whether early Roman presence in Greek territories was more intentional expansion or accidental entanglement. Documents hint at both, but the exact motivations blur like ink smudged by time or like a historian sighing loudly into their 6th cup of coffee. You step aside as the cart finally lurches forward, wobbling dangerously but moving nonetheless. The soldiers nod politely, one of them muttering, "If this thing breaks again, I'm blaming Apollo." You continue onward until the trail opens to a quiet overlook. Below, the sea curves around the coastline in a shimmering arc, dotted with trading ships that drift as if half asleep. Wooden hulls creak, sails flap lazily, and the gulls above you cry out as though complaining about the breakfast options. You pause here, letting the breeze cool your face, letting the soft blue of the water settle into your mind. It's peaceful, unhurried, timeless, and yet this region, this coastline, will soon become one of the great crossroads of history. Rome and Greece, drifting toward each other like continents you can't stop from colliding. You step forward gently, feeling the day stretch ahead of you like a long road waiting for your footprints. You leave the overlook and descend along a winding hillside path, the stones shifting slightly beneath your sandals. The air grows warmer, thick with the mixed scents of wild thyme, salt, and dust, the unofficial perfume of the ancient Mediterranean. As you walk, you notice the sound of your footsteps echoing faintly between the hills, as though the land itself is listening in. Or judging. Probably judging. Ancient landscapes tend to have strong opinions. The trail eventually widens and spills you out onto a broader road, road in the ancient sense. Flat enough, functional enough, and featuring just enough random rocks to ensure you never get too comfortable. Ahead, Travelers move at an unhurried pace. Greek farmers carrying baskets of figs, Roman traders leading mules overloaded with amphorae, and one man balancing a shocking number of clay pots on a single shoulder like he's performing a street act nobody asked for. A Roman woman walks past you, wrapped in a neat stola with Greek embroidery along the hem. She hums a lullaby that sounds distinctly Greek, but the rhythm has that Roman determination, like she's trying to make even music march in straight lines. This blending is everywhere, not loud, not dramatic, but subtle, almost shy. You can feel the two cultures mingling beneath the surface, like colors slowly bleeding together in fabric. The major historical fact quietly unfolding around you is this. By the 3rd century BCE, Rome, still technically a young power, was already absorbing Greek culture with the enthusiasm of someone discovering a hobby they'll never stop talking about. Greek tutors filled Roman households, Greek art decorated Roman villas, and Roman generals quoted Greek poets in battle speeches they hoped someone would write down. Whether this was admiration or insecurity is still debated, but either way, Rome was borrowing heavily. To your right, you notice a small cluster of ruins, a few columns, a fragment of frieze, and a stone basin filled with rainwater. A boy sits perched on one of the fallen columns, idly tossing pebbles into the basin. Every time a pebble plunks into the water, he grins like he's achieved a personal victory. One obscure fact. Ancient Greek children played a game almost identical to modern hopscotch, except theirs sometimes involved drawing tiny labyrinths, which is perhaps the most Greek thing imaginable. As you walk farther, you pass a group of philosophers sitting beneath a fig tree. They're mid-argument, naturally. One insists that virtue is the highest good. Another insists that pleasure is. A third insists that both are missing the point entirely. A fourth, who seems to have joined the conversation solely to cause chaos, argues that perhaps all of them are illusions. They pause as you move by, giving you the same evaluating stare people give when they're deciding whether to invite you into a complicated group chat. You decide to keep walking. Your brain didn't stretch before this hike. Around the next bend, a Roman envoy approaches, carrying scrolls sealed with wax. He's flanked by 2 soldiers who look extremely tired, as if they've spent the entire morning trying to decipher the envoy's travel schedule, which is written with a confidence that reality does not support. As he passes, you overhear him grumbling about Greek city-states being too independent for their own good, a sentiment that probably sounded familiar across centuries and continents. Historians still debate whether Rome's early involvement in Greek political disputes was motivated more by strategy, or by Greece repeatedly sending Rome invitations to solve problems Rome didn't actually want to solve. Either way, the relationship resembled 2 siblings, where one keeps announcing, "Everything is fine," while the other quietly calls for backup. The sun climbs higher now, warming your shoulders. The light glints off distant city walls, your first glimpse of a Greek polis rising from the plain below. White stone, red roofs, neat streets laid out like someone finally discovered the grid system and wanted to brag about it. Smoke curls from chimneys. Voices drift faintly up the hill, merchants calling prices, animals braying, someone shouting about lost sandals. As you descend toward the city, you hear another sound. A rhythmic chorus of hammers striking bronze. Metal workers are already deep into their day, shaping armor, tools, and ornamental trinkets meant to outlast them. Sparks flash like tiny fireflies, and the air carries the warm, coppery scent of worked metal. You walk through the city gate, greeted by a carved relief of Athena, sharp-eyed, steady, protective. She looks like she's evaluating whether you remembered your daily responsibilities. You mentally assure her that you're trying your best. The city is alive with the pulse of everyday life. Women carry baskets of bread. Children chase a stray dog that is absolutely not participating willingly. Old men sit in doorways discussing politics with the furrowed brows of people who have been concerned about their government for several thousand years. You slip into the rhythm of it, all the bright sun, the warm stone beneath your feet, the sense that this city, like so many Greek cities, has existed in a state of constant conversation with itself. Here, ideas are currency, pride is fuel, and every street corner feels like an unfinished story. And somewhere in this bustling place, though you can't yet see it, the long arc of history bends slowly toward conflict, not because war is inevitable, but because when 2 cultures admire each other deeply and misunderstand each other constantly, friction eventually becomes flame. You weave deeper into the city as sunlight bounces off whitewashed walls, bright enough that you briefly consider inventing sunglasses a couple thousand years early. The streets twist and curl, not in chaotic confusion, but in that charming, we built this before city planning was a thing sort of way. Your sandals tap against polished stones, worn smooth by generations of movement, merchants, philosophers, soldiers, people exactly like you, doing their best not to trip in public. A pair of street vendors compete loudly for your attention. One selling figs so glossy they look painted on, the other offering sesame cakes that smell like they were baked by someone who truly believes in carbohydrates. You politely accept a fig from the first vendor, who beams at you with the hopeful intensity of someone who wants 5-star reviews before 5-star reviews exist. Ahead of you, a small crowd gathers at a public fountain. Water spills from a carved lion's mouth into a wide basin, cool and clear, reflecting the sharp blue of the sky. Women fill clay jugs, children splash each other, and an elderly man is very intently washing a pair of sandals as though preparing them for a formal event. The splash of water echoes through the square, rhythmic and soothing, a reminder that even in bustling cities, moments of calm slip through like sunlight through windows. The major historical fact in this moment emerges naturally. Greek city-states were intensely proud of their independence. Each polis maintained its own government, army, customs, and rivalries, tiny worlds within a world. It wasn't just identity, it was the foundation of Greek political thought. To many Greeks, the idea of a unified Greece was more poetic than practical, like claiming your entire neighborhood as one household. You continue past a small workshop where a potter spins a clay vessel with the ease of someone who has absolutely no doubts about their life choices. The wheel whirs softly. Clay splatters. A cat dozes nearby, flicking an ear every few seconds to remind the potter who truly owns the space. Shelves of finished pots line the walls, some decorated with black figure scenes of myths, others with simple, swirling patterns. One obscure tidbit. Many Greek vases were labeled with the phrase kalos, meaning beautiful, often referring not to the pot itself, but to a specific person admired by the artist. History's earliest shout-outs. Further down the street, you hear an argument lively, harmless, passionately overdramatic. Two men stand outside a wine shop, debating whether the latest crop of Roman poets are endearingly earnest or hopelessly clumsy with metaphor. A third man chimes in to declare that all poetry is a distraction from farming, which earns him the universal response of being completely ignored. You squeeze between two buildings and find yourself in a small square where a group of young athletes practice wrestling. Their movements are precise, controlled, and sweaty in a way that suggests the Mediterranean sun takes no breaks. A trainer shouts instructions with the kind of intensity normally reserved for people trying to convince others to invest in questionable business ventures. The wrestlers occasionally shoot you a glance, silently inviting you to join. You decline with great enthusiasm. Historians still debate whether Greek athletic training was primarily about preparing for war or simply a deeply cultural celebration of physical excellence. The truth is likely both, wrapped together in a society that loved competition almost as much as it loved telling stories about competition. You keep moving until the buildings open onto a large central plaza, the Agora. It buzzes with life. Merchants displaying woven fabrics in vibrant colors. Philosophers, perched on steps holding court with audiences of curious listeners, and spice sellers waving tiny pouches under people's noses to lure them with scents of cinnamon, myrrh, and something suspiciously like burnt rosemary. You pause beside a stall selling small bronze charms. The merchant explains, with the solemnity of someone revealing sacred truths, that these charms protect travelers from getting lost. He gestures toward one shaped like a tiny turtle. You consider buying it because even if it doesn't work, carrying a turtle-shaped thing seems like excellent life advice. Shouts from the other end of the Agora draw your attention. A small group has surrounded a man standing on an overturned crate, reenacting a famous battle using a stick as a spear and a basket lid as a shield. His dramatic flourishes are impressive, though he occasionally forgets which side he's on. The audience doesn't seem to mind, they're too entertained by his commitment. This is where you truly feel it. The pulse of Greek daily life, lively but not frantic, thoughtful but not pretentious, proud but never dull, and running quietly beneath it all is the faint tension of a world changing faster than tradition would prefer. Rome's presence grows stronger each year, sometimes welcomed, sometimes resented, sometimes just tolerated like a neighbor who borrows tools and returns them slightly worse. You start walking again, letting the agora fade behind you as the city's voices blend into a warm, familiar hum. Somewhere up ahead, a new path waits, one that will soon lead you toward the deeper heart of this ancient world and the slow, steady rise of Roman influence. For now, you breathe in, breathe out, and follow the street that curves gently toward the hills. You follow the street uphill, until the noise of the agora softens into a distant, pleasant murmur. The buildings thin out, replaced by gardens of herbs and low stone benches where students lounge in the shade. The air grows cooler here, touched by a faint breeze drifting down from the higher terraces of the city. You hear the subtle crunch of gravel beneath your sandals and the soft hum of bees drifting lazily from one thyme blossom to another, doing their ancient job with zero appreciation from the human world. Ahead, a columned porch stretches across a quiet courtyard. This is no ordinary building. This is a place where words are crafted like tools and wielded like weapons. The place where scholars gather not to argue about groceries, or who forgot to feed the goats, but to dissect the nature of virtue, justice, and the meaning of a good life. You step onto the smooth stone floor, feeling the coolness rise through your soles. A small group of students sits cross-legged, holding wax, tablets. Their teacher, an older Greek philosopher, with hair like a frayed scroll and robes that have seen much better decades, paces slowly. His voice is gentle yet firm, the kind that makes you believe wisdom is a thing you can inhale if you sit close enough. He pauses beside you. "Are you here to learn?" he asks, "or simply escaping the sun?" You answer with the kind of vague nod that suggests both. It seems to satisfy him. The major historical fact unfolds as naturally as his lecture. Greek philosophy deeply shaped Roman thought. Roman elites studied Greek language, memorized Greek texts, and adopted Greek ethical systems. Stoicism, the philosophy that would later guide Roman generals and emperors, was born on porches, just like this one. The ideas whispered here would soon cross seas and borders, absorbed into Roman politics, Roman virtue, and even Roman boredom, because nothing encourages philosophical reflection quite like sitting through 5-hour Senate meetings. The students scribble notes while the philosopher explains that knowledge is a lifelong pursuit. One boy tries very hard to focus, but his tablet has a small drawing of what appears to be a chicken wearing armor. You decide not to judge. Ancient students doodle too. Off to the side, a small garden grows in neat rows: sage, rosemary, lavender. A tortoise sits calmly in the middle of the path, blocking the way with the stubborn serenity of a creature that mastered the art of not caring centuries ago. One obscure cultural tidbit: some Greek schools kept tortoises as unofficial mascots, believing their calm slowness to symbolize the patience required for wisdom. Also, because tortoises don't wander far, which makes them excellent classroom companions. The philosopher's voice shifts to a new topic, one you recognize, even if you've never heard it spoken aloud: the growing influence of Rome. He mentions Roman envoys walking through their streets, Roman ships docking in their 20 harbors, Roman merchants buying Greek art like it's going out of style. There is admiration in his tone, but also concern. Greece has always been the teacher. Rome, increasingly, is becoming the student who copies all your notes and then somehow gets promoted. Historians still debate whether Greek intellectuals of this period genuinely embraced Roman rise or simply tolerated it because Rome paid well and admired them loudly. The truth may lie in the philosopher's sigh, long, thoughtful, accepting that echoes across the porch. He asks the students whether a culture can be conquered if its ideas remain undefeated. One student says no, another says yes. A third says probably, with the confidence of someone who answers everything with probably. The philosopher smiles patiently, as though he's heard all three answers 1,000 times. He invites you and the students to walk with him through the courtyard. Olive trees cast shifting shadows across the stone walkway. Birds hop along the edges of the fountain, dipping their beaks into the cool water. The philosopher explains that knowledge flows like rivers, sometimes peacefully, sometimes aggressively, but always forward. Greek ideas will flow into Rome, he says, because Rome thirsts for them, and Rome will grow stronger because of it. You walk slower now, letting the courtyard calm settle into your bones. The sound of the breeze rustling through olive leaves is hypnotic, and for a moment, you feel time stretch, soften, blur. This quiet porch, These thoughtful voices, they are small pieces of a much larger mosaic, a mosaic soon to shift dramatically. As the philosopher dismisses his students, he gives you a knowing look. History, he says, is always moving, even when we pretend it is not. You step off the porch and back into the sunlight, the cool stone lingering on your feet, the scent of herbs clinging softly to your clothes. The path ahead curves toward the heart of the city, toward politics, pride, and the first whispers of conflict. You follow it gently, letting curiosity pull you onward. You follow the winding path downhill into the political heart of the polis, where the air feels thicker not with heat, but with opinions. Opinions so dense you could bottle them and use them as building material. The noise grows steadily as you approach a large rectangular building with sturdy columns and a terracotta roof. The Bouleuterion, the council house, where decisions are made, alliances are tested, and someone inevitably accuses someone else of speaking too long. The courtyard outside is already crowded. Men dressed in white chitons lean against pillars, gesturing animatedly with the flair of people who believe hand movements are 70% of communication. Others stand in groups, whispering in low, conspiratorial tones. A few citizens enter the council chamber with a look of resigned determination, the same expression modern people wear when entering. Long meetings with no snacks. You slip inside, drawn by the steady hum of voices. The interior is dimmer, lit by narrow shafts of sunlight that fall between roof beams. Council members sit on wooden benches, arranged in a horseshoe, leaving the center open for speakers. It looks strangely theatrical, as if democracy itself were staging a performance. A man in a dark cloak rises to speak. His voice is firm but weary, polished by years of repeating the same warnings. Rome is growing. Rome is watching. Rome is not simply a passing guest. He argues that Greek city-states must present a united front. The audience gives him a respectful, if slightly skeptical hum. The major historical fact embedded in this moment is unmistakable. Greek states often disagreed more with each other than with outside powers. Their rivalries, Athens against Sparta, Corinth against basically everyone, created cracks Rome would exploit with the precision of someone who has read the instruction manual. As the speaker continues, a man behind you mutters that unity sounds lovely but is wildly unrealistic, which earns a few nods. Another whispers that Rome might actually bring stability, which earns a few raised eyebrows. A third whispers that he'd like to go home for lunch, which earns the most enthusiasm. A scribe at the front scratches furiously on a wax tablet, taking minutes in a style that's equal parts accuracy and interpretive guesswork. His tablet is already dented where someone pressed too hard in frustration earlier. A very human reminder that politics hasn't changed nearly as much as we like to believe. One obscure cultural tidbit. In some cities, council members were chosen by lottery, a system based on the idea that random selection would prevent corruption. In practice, this occasionally resulted in important decisions being made by someone who had come to town that day only to buy sandals. A new voice rises, this one, sharper. The man insists that Rome's recent military successes against Carthage prove they're not to be underestimated. He gestures emphatically, nearly hitting the man next to him, who flinches like this is a common hazard. The audience murmurs. Some nod. Others cross their arms. A few look bored enough to drift into the philosophical realm of daydreaming. Historians still debate whether these debates were genuinely effective or mostly symbolic theatre meant to maintain civic identity. The truth is probably a mix. Decisions happened here, but so did posturing, pride, and the eternal human tradition of talking in circles. Suddenly, the chamber erupts in louder voices as a group of younger men stand, insisting that Greek independence must be defended at all costs. Their faces are flushed with passion or the lack of ventilation. You notice, however, that even these fiery patriots avoid making eye contact with the older men who have actually fought in wars. Idealism tends to wilt in the presence of experience. A council leader bangs a staff on the floor, calling for order. The voices quiet into reluctant grumbles. He declares that a diplomatic envoy will be sent to Rome, a gesture of respect, curiosity, and maybe a little desperation. A few council members groan softly, likely imagining the long journey and the even longer negotiations. As the session concludes, people spill back into the courtyard. Some continue arguing as they walk. Others switch the topic to lunch, as if politics were merely an appetizer. You step aside to avoid being run over by a man who seems deeply committed to exiting quickly. A small bird perches on the edge of the council roof, chirping loudly enough to cut through the fading noise. Its carefree tune feels almost ironic after listening to a room full of men trying to predict the future with more confidence than accuracy. You stand there, letting the late morning sun warm your shoulders. The city feels slightly different now, still vibrant, still proud, but carrying a subtle tremor beneath its daily rhythms. A tremor shaped by Rome's rising shadow. As you begin to walk away, the distant clang of metal and the distant hum of the agora return, blending into the soundtrack of a world edging toward irreversible change. You follow the road that leads toward the city gates, where the horizon opens wide and history stretches out in front of you, like a map waiting for your footsteps. You exit the city through its sun-warmed stone gate, stepping once again into the open countryside. The air outside feels lighter, fresher, as if the city's debates are trapped inside its walls and can't follow you out here. The road beneath your feet stretches toward the coast, a long ribbon of packed earth bordered by wild grasses that sway lazily in the breeze. Cicadas hum from the trees, keeping time with the slow rhythm of your footsteps. A small caravan moves ahead of you, 2 wagons, a handful of pack animals, and a Roman envoy traveling under a shade canopy that is definitely more luxurious than anything available to the locals. The envoy sits upright, scrolling through a wax tablet with the absorbed expression of someone preparing an overly polite speech for people who will absolutely not react politely. His guard walks beside him, fanning himself with a palm leaf and looking deeply unhappy about the sun situation. A shepherd waves as you pass him on the side of the road. His sheep graze peacefully nearby, each one fluffy and mildly suspicious. A particularly round sheep steps directly into your path, stares at you with the gravity of a voting official, and refuses to move until you walk around it. One obscure tidbit. Some ancient Greek shepherds genuinely believed certain sheep had prophetic tendencies. Judging by this one's intensity, you're willing to believe it. You continue along the road until the sea comes back into view, a bright, shimmering blue that stretches beyond the horizon. Light dances across the waves, glittering like scattered coins. A faint smell of salt fills the air, crisp and cleansing, almost enough to wash away the memory of political debates lingering in your ears. Down the slope, a modest port town sprawls along the shoreline. Fishing nets hang from beams, merchants unload amphorae stamped with trade symbols. Wooden ships rest lazily in shallow waters. You hear sailors shouting greetings, bargaining over supplies, and arguing about whether a particular barrel contains olives or that experimental fish sauce someone should really stop making. You follow the envoy's caravan into the bustle. Children run barefoot between crates, giggling as a sailor half-heartedly chases them away from a pile of fragile jars. A woman sells grilled fish skewers on a street corner, the aroma drifting temptingly through the wind. A group of older men play a board game on a wooden table, slapping pieces down with the dramatic intensity of generals planning battles. The major historical fact emerges, naturally from the scene. Greek coastal towns were vital arteries for commerce and diplomacy. It was through ports like this that Rome slowly intertwined itself with Greek life, through trade agreements, military aid, political friendships, and the irresistible human habit of exchanging ideas whenever ships dock. Long before armies marched, ships carried influence. Near the pier, a group of sailors pull a long galley to shore. The hull is weathered, the ropes stiff with salt, the oars stowed neatly along its sides. The ship's figurehead is a carved wooden owl, Athena's symbol, its eyes wide and possibly judging your posture. The sailors begin an intricate ritual of unloading cargo while simultaneously complaining about unloading cargo. Their synchronization is impressive. Historians still debate whether these ports were more shaped by Greek maritime skill or by the growing presence of Roman naval power. Some records describe cheerful cooperation, others describe simmering tension. Reality probably sat in the middle, eating a fish skewer and shaking its head. A lively commotion draws your attention to the far end of the pier. Several traders shout as 2 men haggle intensely over the price of a bronze statue shaped like a small, very muscular hero. The buyer insists it's flawed. The seller insists it's artistically bold. The statue's exaggerated biceps do not help resolve the disagreement. A fisherman nearby mends a large net with quiet patience. He glances up at you, squints, and says, "Keep your sandals tight. Sea towns swallow loose things." You thank him, though you're not entirely sure if he's being metaphorical. Past the fishing boats, larger merchant ships rise like wooden giants. One Roman vessel currently unloads amphorae stamped with Latin letters. A Greek dockworker points at the letters, shrugs, and jokes loudly to his friend that Latin looks like someone tried to write Greek after bumping their elbow. You try not to, laugh too loudly. You walk out onto a narrow breakwater where the sea crashes gently against the stones. The breeze cools your skin, carrying the faint sounds of the port, the chatter of sailors, the creak of rope, the flap of sails waiting for wind. You pause here, absorbing the moment. The world feels wide and connected, threads stretching between cities, islands, and cultures. This is the edge of Greece, and yet it's also the beginning of something larger. Across this water lies Italy. Across this water lies Rome. And soon, diplomacy will flow between these shores like tides. A gull swoops low overhead, its call loud and scratchy, as if reminding you that the journey is just beginning. The envoy's caravan prepares to board a ship bound for Italy, and the wind shifts, carrying the scent of distant lands. You take one last look at the sunlit town before stepping toward the pier. The sea waits, history waits, and the gentle motion of the waves seems to whisper, "It's time to cross." You step aboard the wooden galley, just as the sailors prepare to cast off, the deck warm beneath your feet from hours of sunlight. The ship sways gently, not yet committed to the journey but already practicing its sea rhythm. Ropes creak, oars slide into place, and somewhere a sailor mutters a sailor-type complaint about this being his third crossing this month, and the sea, absolutely knowing it. The Roman envoy sits under a small canopy at the stern, trying to look dignified while fanning himself vigorously. His documents are arranged neatly in a wooden chest beside him, sealed and stacked in the anxious order of someone who really wants these papers to stay dry. The guard stands nearby, eyeing both the sea and the chest with equal suspicion, as though either might betray him. The ship pushes away from the pier. The town slowly shrinks behind you, white walls softening, red roofs blending together, the bustle fading into a faint hum. Ahead lies open water, shimmering beneath the midday sun, like a sheet of hammered bronze. The oars dip into the sea with rhythmic splashes, and the wind billows the sail gently. You feel the shift, it's subtle, but you know you're no longer on Greek soil. A sailor offers you a place to sit on a coiled rope. You accept, because it's the most comfortable option available, and because refusing makes the rope feel rejected. Waves slap softly against the hull. The ship rocks, sways, breathes. After a few minutes, your body adjusts, and you find a steady balance. Though nearby, one passenger is losing that battle spectacularly. The sailors disguise their laughter poorly. The major historical fact glides naturally into view. Crossings like these connected the Greek and Roman worlds long before war tied them together. Envoys, merchants, philosophers, and curious travelers moved across this water, spreading ideas faster than armies could ever march. It's part of the reason Rome admired Greece so deeply. They knew the world beyond their peninsula because Greek sailors had written the maps. You lean against the railing and watch dolphins arc gracefully near the ship. Their sleek bodies cut through the waves, keeping pace with effortless joy. One sailor claims dolphins bring good luck. Another says dolphins just like to show off. A third insists dolphins secretly judge everyone. You decide all three are probably true. The ship continues west, deeper into open sea. The horizon stretches clean and endless. Clouds gather in soft tufts overhead, shaped like sheep grazing on an invisible field. A light breeze cools your face, carrying the scent of salt, and something faintly metallic like the sea is giving you a hint about the storms it keeps tucked away. One obscure cultural tidbit. Greek sailors often made small offerings before voyages, tossing bits of bread or fruit into the water to appease sea spirits. Today, a sailor casually flicks a grape into the waves. He says it's for Poseidon, but the way he smiles suggests it's also for luck and for tradition, and maybe just because he likes throwing grapes. As the journey settles into a steady rhythm, the Roman envoy clears his throat and attempts to engage the sailors in polite conversation. They nod absently while continuing their work. He talks about diplomacy, alliances, the importance of mutual respect between great civilizations. One sailor glances at you with a look that says, he's definitely practicing for someone important. Historians still debate whether early Roman diplomatic missions to Greece were genuine acts of cooperation or strategic posturing disguised as courtesy. Letters from the period read like polite invitations from people who absolutely intend to rearrange your furniture once they're inside your house. Hours pass. The sun begins its slow descent, dragging warm colors across the sky. Pink, gold, rose, and amber spill over the waves, painting the sea with soft, sleepy hues. The ship rocks gently, the air cools, and conversations quiet into murmurs. The envoy finally stops rehearsing his speech. A sailor begins humming a tune about home. Night approaches. Stars prick through the sky one by one, forming constellations you half recognize. A Greek sailor points upward and names them. Orion the hunter, Argo the ship, Cygnus the swan. He recites them like old friends. Then he adds a new constellation. That one looks like a man trying to fold a cloak in strong wind. You look, he's not wrong. A lantern glows near the mast, casting warm golden light across the deck. The sea becomes a dark, endless mirror. The oars rest. The sail flutters softly. The ship drifts on gentle currents, carried by the unseen hands of the sea. You inhale deeply. The salt air fills your lungs, cool and grounding. You feel strangely suspended, not in danger, not in haste, simply floating between worlds, between Greece and Rome, between cultures shifting, merging, redefining themselves. The envoy finally sleeps. The sailors rest in clusters. The waves whisper around the hull. And above you, the stars shimmer with ancient stories waiting to be retold. Italy is still beyond the horizon, but you can feel it waiting solid, rising, inevitable. You close your eyes, letting the sea rock you gently, and drift into the quiet of the night. Dawn breaks quietly, as if the sky is easing itself awake after dreaming of open water. Pale light stretches across the deck, revealing sleeping sailors curled beneath blankets that look questionably thin for comfort. The sea is calmer now, almost glass-like, gently nudging the ship forward. You hear the soft clunk of wooden bowls as someone begins preparing a modest breakfast bread, olives, and a humble portion of dried fish, whose aroma announces itself long before you see it. The Roman envoy is already awake, smoothing out his hair with the solemn dedication of a man who believes appearances directly influence diplomacy. He glances toward the horizon repeatedly, as though willing Italy to appear faster. His guard stands next to him, yawning with zero diplomatic restraint. Gradually, the coastline emerges a hazy line at first, then a clearer shape. Hills rise from the shore, dotted with early morning shadows. Small clusters of white-walled houses seem to grow from the earth, to itself. The scent of pine drifts over the sea as the ship nears the bay. Italy, at last, greets you with a landscape that feels both familiar and new. The sailors work quickly to bring the ship alongside a weathered wooden pier. Ropes fly, knots tighten, and planks thump against the deck as a makeshift walkway is set in place. You step off the galley and onto Roman soil for the first time. The earth feels warmer here, drier, a little more rugged, as if the land itself stands straighter. A group of Roman dock workers approaches, wearing sturdy tunics, and the subtle expression of people evaluating whether new arrivals will cause them extra work. One nods politely as the envoy hands over travel documents with the flourish of someone presenting a sacred offering. The major historical fact arrives gently with your footsteps. Rome's rise wasn't just military. It was built on infrastructure: roads, ports, communication networks. This small port, though modest, is connected to a web of roads leading straight to Rome itself. For centuries to come, travelers like you will marvel at how quickly Roman roads can carry you across regions that once felt impossibly distant. A horse cart rattles past, carrying crates of figs and amphorae. The driver shouts to make way, then apologizes with the same breath. Nearby, a group of children practice throwing small stones into the water, arguing passionately about whose stone made the loudest splash. One obscure tidbit: Roman children often played a game similar to modern Duck, Duck, Goose, except theirs involved tapping someone's head with a wreath instead of a hand. You spot a few children doing exactly this, each tap executed with theatrical force. The envoy motions for you to follow him up a sloping road toward the inland hills. The path is well trodden, lined with cypress trees that stand tall and still like silent guardians. Their dark green needles rustle softly in the breeze. The sky grows brighter with each step, shifting from pale lavender to gentle gold. You pass a small farmhouse with terracotta tiles and a vineyard stretching behind it. The smell of crushed grapes drifts through the air, mingling with the scent of freshly turned soil. A woman hangs laundry on a line, humming a tune that sounds halfway between a lullaby and a warning. A dog watches from a doorway, giving you a slow blink of acceptance. Farther along, the road widens into a stretch paved with large, flat stones. Roman engineering in its early, confident form. The stones are fitted so precisely that even now, they seem almost smug about it. A pair of travelers approaches from the opposite direction, one carrying a pack of scrolls, the other balancing a basket of bread and herbs. They nod to you and the envoy, then continue on without breaking their pleasant morning silence. Historians still debate how early Roman identity formed, whether it emerged naturally over time or whether it was consciously shaped through laws, customs, and shared narratives. But walking this road, you feel the quiet certainty of a people who trust in their own momentum. Confidence here grows like the vines on the hillsides, slow, steady, entwined with everything around it. As you crest a hill, the world opens. Villages dot the valley below, smoke rising from morning hearths. Herds of sheep graze in orderly fields. A river winds through the landscape like a silver ribbon. In the distance, you see the faint, rising outline of Rome. Not yet an empire, but unmistakably ambitious. Even from here, it radiates a pull, as if history leans toward it naturally. The envoy takes a deep breath, visibly preparing himself for the upcoming diplomatic work. You can sense the weight of his mission. A conversation between two cultures that admire one another deeply, misunderstand one another frequently, and are destined to clash eventually. But for now, the road continues gently forward, inviting you onward. You take a few more steps, feeling the morning sun warm your shoulders. Rome is waiting. The road leads you down into a valley, where the morning air is cool and soft, carrying hints of river mist and the faint aroma of fresh bread drifting from distant farmhouses. Your sandals tap rhythmically against the impeccably fitted paving stones, each one placed with the confidence of a civilization that believes roads are the backbone of destiny. Birds circle lazily overhead, tracing looping patterns across a sky that is brightening into an unhurried blue. As you walk, the landscape slowly begins to change. Farm plots become larger. Stone boundary markers appear more frequently. Villas, modest at first, then gradually more impressive, dot the hillsides, each with terracotta roofs glowing warm in the sunlight. You pass a vineyard, where workers are already trimming vines, with the practiced ease of people who have done this every day of their lives. The Roman envoy leads the group with brisk determination, occasionally adjusting his cloak so it drapes with maximum dignity. He glances back to ensure his guard and the chest of documents remain exactly where they should be. The guard, in turn, looks at you as if silently asking whether you also feel like this journey is going to be important and official. You return a subtle, reassuring nod. Eventually, the road crests a rise, and then you see it. Rome. Not yet the colossal marble masterpiece it will one day become, but already something grander than anything Greece has shown you so far. The city sprawls confidently across the hills, wrapped in layers of walls and bustling with life. Smoke drifts upward from bakeries and workshops. The Tiber River glimmers beneath morning light as it cuts through the heart of the city. Bridges connect districts like sturdy stitches in a vast, living tapestry. People flow along the road with purposeful energy. Farmers carrying baskets of figs, merchants driving carts stacked high with amphorae, soldiers walking in, tight, disciplined groups that part the crowd simply by existing. Children weave between all of them, laughing as they chase a dog that is clearly faster and clearly enjoying it. The major historical fact becomes clear with each step closer. Rome's strength was rooted in practicality. While Greece dazzled the world with philosophy, art, and imagination, Rome mastered infrastructure, law, and organization. Their roads stretched farther, their judicial system was more structured, and their military machine operated with a discipline that made even distant kingdoms tremble politely. You walk through a shaded grove near the outskirts, where travelers rest under tall pines. A vendor sells cups of watered wine from a clay jug. The drink is surprisingly refreshing, and it earns the vendor the grateful sigh of a nearby soldier who looks like he hasn't sighed happily in months. One obscure tidbit. Romans loved adding herbs to their drinks, especially mint, rosemary, and sometimes coriander. The vendor brags that great generals drank his recipe. Whether that's true or just brilliant marketing, you decide not to investigate. As you approach the main gate, the flow of traffic thickens. A group of stonemasons pushes a heavy cart laden with marble blocks. A pair of priests walk beside them, chanting softly, their robes decorated with embroidered lightning bolts. A woman carrying a basket of live chickens tries to negotiate passage with a trader whose goats have decided to block the gate entirely. You take a wide step to avoid one goat who seems personally offended by your existence. The guard at the gate examines the envoy's documents with the kind of seriousness that suggests he enjoys his job, or at least enjoys looking important. After a brief exchange, he waves the group through. Inside, the city opens up in a swirl of sound and movement. You step onto a wide street, paved in smooth stones that reflect sunlight in small, bright flashes. Rows of tall, insular apartment buildings of surprising height loom above you. Laundry flaps from high windows. Voices echo between the walls, creating a layered, rhythmic noise like 1,000 conversations overlapping without ever colliding. The smell of baking bread competes with the aroma of sizzling meat from a nearby food stall. A woman sells honey cakes dusted with herbs. A boy performs juggling tricks for tips, dropping things occasionally, but maintaining theatrical confidence each time. The crowd rewards him with amused coins. Historians still debate exactly when Rome began seeing itself as the rightful leader of the Mediterranean world. Some argue it was after defeating Carthage. Others say it grew slowly as the Republic expanded. But walking these streets, you sense it. An unshakable belief in order, in power, in purpose. Rome doesn't dream quietly. It builds its dreams out of stone. You and the envoy move through the Forum district, where senators in crisp togas discuss matters. Of state, with the kind of calm urgency that comes from believing your decisions matter on a global scale. Statues of heroes line the pathways. Temples rise like anchors of culture and faith. You pause at a fountain where cool water spills from a carved wolf's mouth. Children dip their hands in, laughing at the cold. You do the same. It's refreshing, grounding, and tastes faintly of minerals and thyme. The envoy straightens his cloak once more. Ahead lies the Senate. Ahead lies diplomacy. Ahead lies the next step in a long, tangled story between Greece and Rome. A story built on admiration, competition, and the quiet certainty that both civilizations think they should be the ones teaching the other. You take one more breath of the busy Roman air and follow the envoy forward. You follow the envoy toward a broad set of steps, leading up to a grand building overlooking the Forum. Its columns rise tall and austere, carved from pale stone that glows faintly in the midday sun. Even from a distance you can feel it, the authority, the gravity, the sheer theatrical confidence of Roman politics. This is the Curia, the Senate House, and it greets you with the subtle intensity of a room that has seen too many important decisions and not enough naps. The envoy clears his throat, adjusts his cloak for maximum symmetry, and ascends the steps with the forced calm of someone approaching an exam they did not study for. You follow closely behind, feeling the heavy air shift as you step across the threshold. Inside, the Senate chamber stretches wide and solemn. The walls rise in smooth plains of stone, unadorned except for evenly spaced bronze sconces that hold flickering lamps. Wooden benches curve around the room in tidy arcs, each polished smooth by decades of togas sliding back and forth during particularly dramatic debates. The space is cooler than expected. Thick stone tends to hold the night's chill. A faint scent of olive oil and old parchment lingers, blending, oddly, with the earthy smell of sand sprinkled across the floor to reduce slipperiness. You hear soft coughs, quiet murmurs, and the shuffling of robes. Senators file in steadily, moving to their seats with practiced dignity. Their togas are crisp, their expressions sharp. These are men who spent their lives learning to appear authoritative, even when they were mostly confused. You can feel political tension vibrating subtly through the air, like static building before a storm. A senator near you grumbles to a colleague about the rising price of figs. Another complains that the latest batch of Greek sculptures sent to a wealthy patron look too idealistic, which, in fairness, is a Greek specialty. A third senator warms his hands over a small oil lamp, muttering that the chamber is always cold because the gods prefer dramatic atmospheres. The major historical fact takes shape naturally as the proceedings begin. Rome's political elite deeply respected Greek culture, philosophy, art, literature, but they also felt an unspoken rivalry. They admired Greece, but they wanted to surpass Greece. This tension lived quietly within moments like this, tucked behind formal greetings and carefully worded speeches. A herald bangs a staff on the floor. Silence settles over the room like a heavy cloak. The consul, one of the year's two highest officials, steps forward, his posture straight and stern. He begins with a long, ceremonial greeting, the kind that makes you wonder how many senators are silently counting ceiling tiles to pass the time. Then comes the introduction of the Greek envoy. Your envoy steps forward, chest slightly puffed, hands clasped behind his back. He begins speaking in polished Greek, translated by a bilingual aide. His voice is smooth, practiced, every phrase carefully chosen to sound respectful without sounding submissive. He praises Rome's engineering, Rome's laws, Rome's impressive marble supply. Several senators straighten, visibly pleased. But then he pivots to his true purpose: maintaining Greek autonomy, discouraging Roman interference in local disputes, and very delicately reminding Rome that the Greeks invented most of the ideas Rome now loves quoting. A ripple moves through the senators. Some nod approvingly, some frown. One raises an eyebrow with such theatrical flair you almost applaud. One obscure tidbit: Romans sometimes embedded wax under their togas to help them sit neatly during long Senate sessions. Today, you spot one senator discreetly adjusting his drapery, the wax making a faint crackling sound. He looks around quickly to ensure no one heard. The consul responds calmly, but with unmistakable Roman firmness. He speaks of friendship, mutual respect, shared heritage, but beneath the surface, you can hear it, the quiet assertion that Rome has a role to play in stabilizing the region. A role that sounds very much like leadership. A role that Greece may not fully appreciate. Historians still debate whether early Roman diplomatic language was intentionally manipulative or simply built on sincere but confident convictions about Roman duty. Letters from the time offer both interpretations, which is academically infuriating and historically typical. Another senator rises, arguing that Rome must ensure peace across the Mediterranean, even if that means guiding Greek affairs. A murmur of approval follows. A different senator counters sharply, warning that overextension could weaken Rome. A few men nod vigorously, mostly those who still haven't eaten lunch. The debate grows layered, textured, a tapestry of pride, caution, ambition. Voices rise and fall like waves. Some speak with fiery conviction, others with weary patience. One older senator stands, begins a long speech about tradition, and is politely ignored by half the room. The envoy maintains his composure, responding with tact, weaving Greek logic through Roman political currents. You admire his stamina. You also to admire his ability to disguise frustration behind a serene diplomatic smile. Eventually, the senators indicate that further discussions will continue privately over the coming days. Politics, after all, is rarely resolved in a single dramatic moment. It's a slow dance, full of strategic steps and subtle pushes. As the session concludes, senators file out in groups, whispering animatedly. One complains that his sandals are pinching. Another mentions needing to consult augurs before the next vote. A third asks a colleague if he wants to join him for wine before the day becomes unreasonable, which is perhaps the most relatable line you've heard. You and the envoy step back into the sunlight. The forum hums with life vendors, shouting prices, citizens debating news, priests tending to altars. The air feels warmer now, as if Rome itself has exhaled. You stand on the curious steps, feeling the weight of everything you just witnessed. Two civilizations circling each other with admiration and suspicion, shaping a future neither fully understands yet. The envoy adjusts his cloak again, determination sharpening his features. There is more to discuss, more to negotiate, and a long road still ahead. You descend from the curious steps with the envoy, stepping straight back into the living pulse of the forum, the heart of Roman life, beating loudly beneath midday sun. The marble paving stones are warm beneath your feet, reflecting light so brightly that even statues seem to squint. Voices overlap everywhere. Merchants calling out prices, citizens arguing about taxes, children darting between stalls, and the occasional donkey braying with the unmistakable energy of someone who wants attention. A row of market tents stretches along the main street, their awnings fluttering in the breeze. One vendor sells olive oil in amphorae sealed with wax. Another displays baskets of grapes so plump they look like they're trying to escape their own skins. A third insists, loudly, that his salted fish is the freshest in Rome, though the smell suggests it has had several opportunities to reconsider its life choices. As you move through the crowd, you see Roman soldiers patrolling with the relaxed confidence of men who know the street belongs to them. Their armor glints, even in the shade. Their sandals slap rhythmically against stone. Children imitate the sound behind them, marching in tiny, chaotic steps. One soldier turns, eyebrows raised, only to find 3 small kids saluting him with exaggerated solemnity. The major historical fact unfolds naturally before you. Rome's control wasn't just about laws or armies, it was about visibility. Soldiers, magistrates, temples, and public spaces created an environment where Roman order felt tangible. The city itself reminded everyone who was in charge not through fear, but through constant presence. A commotion draws your attention near a row of shops. A baker is angrily insisting that someone stole his best loaf, while a neighbor claims the loaf simply walked away on its own. A small dog nearby burps suspiciously. You smile. Ancient cities, like modern ones, thrived on moments of harmless chaos. You pause beside a fountain carved with dolphins and shells. Cool water trickles over stone, inviting passers-by to drink. A young woman fills a pottery jug, balancing it gracefully against her hip. She hums a tune familiar from Greece, a reminder of how cultures weave together, even when politics refuses to. One obscure tidbit rises quietly from the scene. Romans often used their fountains as informal bulletin boards. Small wax tablets, tied with twine, dangle from a beam above the water's edge. Some announce lost items. Some seek witnesses for disputes. One simply reads, "Looking for someone who knows how to repair amphora cracks. Must be patient." You imagine this was written after a particularly dramatic pottery accident. The envoy leads you through a side street where shadows stretch long against the walls. Laundry hangs overhead like banners announcing domestic triumphs. The scent of herbs drifts from a nearby kitchen, rosemary, bay, and something smoky. A woman stands in her doorway pounding cheese in a mortar, glancing up just long enough to nod at you before resuming her culinary mission. As you weave through these tighter streets, you feel the character of Rome shift. Grand marble gives way to brick and plaster. Wealthy villas sit beside cramped insulae, where laundry lines stretch like improvised architecture. Rome is a patchwork, glorious, flawed, alive. Historians still debate whether these urban contrasts strengthened Roman resilience or created tension between classes. What's clear through your own eyes is how seamlessly the city moves despite its differences. People bump shoulders, share doorways, trade gossip, and navigate daily life with a kind of synchronized disorder. A group of teenagers passes you, laughing loudly as they toss, a leather ball between them. One miscalculates and sends it flying. It bounces off a soldier's shield with a hollow thunk. The soldier's stern face cracks into a reluctant smile as he tosses it back, far harder than necessary. The boys scatter in delighted squeals. Farther ahead, a small procession approaches priests carrying incense, their robes swaying with each step. They chant under their breath, the sound airy and rhythmic, like wind brushing through reeds. Citizens pause respectfully as the group moves along, leaving a trail of fragrant smoke. The envoy pauses to breathe it in. Rome, he murmurs, never forgets to put on a show. His expression is equal parts admiration and wariness. Eventually, the street opens into a quieter district lined with tidy houses and small gardens. Here, the noise softens to a gentle hum. The distant bark of a dog, the whisper of leaves, the faint ring of a smith's hammer. You feel your shoulders lower. Even a powerful city like Rome needs pockets of calm. The envoy stops at a modest lodging house where diplomats often stay. The owner, a woman with sharp eyes and tidy hair, greets him with rehearsed warmth. She offers a room upstairs, fresh water for washing, and the promise of dinner after the heat gives up. You and the envoy step inside. The air is cooler here, dim, quiet, smelling faintly of mint and clean straw. Outside, Rome continues roaring in the sun, but in this small refuge, you feel a shift, a pause, a moment to breathe between political storms. As you sit on a simple wooden stool, sunlight filters through the window in soft golden beams. Dust dances gently in the air, swirling in lazy spirals. Your journey is far from over. Rome has many layers, and soon, you'll see what lies beneath the surface of its strength. The room you're given is simple plaster walls, a wooden bed with a woven mat, and a single window overlooking the narrow street below. The envoy sets down his chest of documents with the reverence of someone placing a sacred relic on an altar. Meanwhile, you take a moment to breathe in the stillness, letting the distant hum of Rome filter gently through the shutters. Outside, the afternoon light has softened, taking on that warm, golden hue that makes everything look slightly more forgiving. The envoy removes his sandals, sighs, in the heartfelt way of a man who has been pretending to enjoy diplomacy all morning, and announces he needs to prepare for tomorrow, which you suspect means practicing a new heroic posture in the mirror. With nothing pressing to do, you slip out into the street again. Rome, in this hour, feels like a great beast, settling into a comfortable sprawl. Neighbors chat from adjacent windows. A man pushes a cart of vegetables while humming off-key. Two cats spar dramatically over a piece of bread someone dropped earlier. The scent of stewing lentils drifts from an open doorway, warm and earthy. You follow the street as it winds gently downhill with no particular rush. Every few steps, you overhear fragments of conversation. A woman debating which gods to thank for her son's safe travels. A merchant arguing that his lemons are the most spherical in the district. An elderly man telling a small crowd that Rome used to be better before everyone started doing things differently. The major historical fact reveals itself in the most ordinary of ways. Romans were master storytellers, not just in epics or inscriptions, but in daily conversation. Their identity was woven from shared myths, collective memories, and stories they retold until they solidified into cultural truth. The tale of Romulus and Remus, the foundation legends, the victories, the defeats, they narrated themselves into a people. You're reminded of this when you pass a small gathering of children sitting around a storyteller beneath a fig tree. His robe is dusty, his sandals worn, but his voice is bright with theatrical energy. He waves his arms grandly as he recounts the tale of Horatius, defending the bridge, likely embellishing every detail. The children gasp at the right moments, lean forward during suspenseful parts, and laugh when Horatius calls the enemy those fellows with dramatic helmets. One obscure tidbit. Some Roman storytellers carried small props in pouches, tiny masks, bits of cloth, miniature spears to enhance their tales. Sure enough, the man pulls out a small wooden shield with chipped paint to demonstrate a heroic stance. The children cheer. You continue walking, drawn into the rhythm of the city. At the next corner, you find a group of scribes seated on low stools, copying texts onto wax tablets. Their movements are swift and precise. One pauses, stretching his hands, muttering that his fingers have union-level complaints today. Historians still debate how widespread literacy truly was among everyday Romans. Evidence suggests far more people could read basic signs and messages than older scholars assumed. But full literacy, the kind needed to read complex texts, remained mostly within the educated classes. Still, you can feel it here. A culture that respects the written word, not just for law and history, but for communication, clarity, and occasionally for complaining to bureaucrats. You wander onward into a quieter lane, where the houses are larger and more elaborate. Painted frescoes decorate several walls, birds in flight, mythic heroes, swirling vines. One fresco in particular catches your eye. A serene scene of a woman reclining with a lyre, surrounded by scrolls. A man nearby explains that Romans loved filling their homes with Greek imagery. Makes us look cultured, he says with a wink. Farther down the lane, you hear rhythmic tapping hammer on stone. A sculptor sits, beside a nearly finished statue, chipping away with gentle precision. His work is clearly inspired by Greek forms, but there's something distinctly Roman in the sturdier limbs, the squarer jaw. We like our heroes strong, he explains, noticing your interest. The Greeks like them graceful. We prefer them to survive a battle. He offers you a piece of stone to feel. It's cool, smooth on one side, rough on the other. You run your thumb over it and imagine the statue slowly emerging from the block, detail by detail, shaped by both Greek ideals and Roman identity. As you leave the sculptor behind, the sky begins to shift toward late afternoon, casting longer shadows across the streets. Lamps are lit in windows. The smell of baking bread grows richer. The city glows gently, no longer loud but not yet quiet, a perfect in-between moment. You return toward the lodging house just as the envoy emerges, cloak settled, expression serious. He is ready for an evening meeting with other diplomats and translators. Another round of layered conversations where every sentence carries 3 meanings and a hint of political maneuvering. As he steps past you, he pauses. Rome, he says, with a thoughtful nod toward the glowing city, is built not just on stones but on stories. Remember that. You do. Because today, you've walked through a mosaic of stories, humble, grand, funny, flawed, and each one pulls you deeper into the vast, unfolding history of these 2 entangled worlds. The envoy gestures for you to follow. There is still so much left to see. You follow the envoy through a network of narrow streets, where the late afternoon light slants between tall buildings, turning the dust in the air into drifting flecks of gold. The city has begun to cool, but only slightly enough that people linger outside their doorways, chatting as they wait for dinner. You hear laughter, the clatter of pottery, the faint whistle of someone attempting a tune and failing gloriously. The envoy leads you toward a large domed structure tucked behind a cluster of shops. Its entrance is framed by 2 columns, and warm lamplight spills from inside. This is the home of a wealthy Roman patron, someone who hosts gatherings of thinkers, diplomats, and important voices. The kind of person who could accidentally shape the future over a well-timed cup of wine. You enter a spacious atrium, where mosaic floors reflect shifting patterns of light. A shallow pool glimmers in the center, dotted with petals from flowers arranged earlier in the day. The scent of rosemary and warm oil drifts gently from nearby braziers. Guests gather in small groups, some seated on couches, others reclining elegantly like they invented comfort. Their voices blend into a soft, educated murmur. You hear Greek and Latin intermingling effortlessly, weaving a tapestry of conversation as smooth as the marble beneath your feet. The major historical fact presses itself subtly into this scene. Elite Romans often sought Greek knowledge eagerly. They hired Greek tutors, read Greek texts, debated Greek ideas, and viewed Greece as both a cultural treasure and a challenge to surpass. Tonight's gathering is a perfect example. Rome seeking to understand Greece while also quietly measuring itself against it. A servant offers you a cup of watered wine with a sprig of mint. You sip it, it's cool and refreshing, and exactly what your tired legs needed. The envoy is quickly swept into a conversation with a small circle of scholars. One of them, a tall man with silvered hair, switches seamlessly between Greek and Latin, his voice warm and confident. You drift closer, listening. We admire Greek poetry, the scholar says, but we Romans prefer clarity over ornament, strength over flourish, precision over excessive metaphors. He gives a playful wink, and the group laughs. The envoy responds politely, but you catch the spark in his eyes. The friendly rivalry between these worlds is alive and well. In another corner, you overhear a pair of young Romans discussing the latest philosophical trends. One claims Stoicism is the future. The other claims Epicureanism is the future. A third insists the future is probably both and also neither. They seem delighted by the confusion. You turn toward a wall where a new fresco is being completed. The artist, brush in hand, paints a scene of Hercules wrestling a lion. The lion looks extremely unimpressed. The artist pauses to explain. We Romans love Greek myths, but we prefer Hercules with bigger muscles. Makes the story feel more achievable. One obscure tidbit. Wealthy Romans often decorated their homes with frescoes meant to show off their Greek education, even if they didn't fully understand what the images represented. Tonight, you spot at least 3 frescoes that seem to depict myths, but with hilariously incorrect details. A winged boar, a hero eating grapes mid-battle, and a sphinx, wearing what is definitely a Roman hairstyle. As the evening deepens, the host, a plump, cheerful man in a richly dyed tunic, claps his hands to gather everyone's attention. Servants bring in platters of olives, cheese, figs, bread. and a large dish of roasted vegetables sprinkled with herbs. The guests settle on couches, eating and discussing politics with the casual ease of people who can afford to. A spirited debate erupts over whether Rome should intervene in a dispute between two Greek cities. One senator argues passionately that Rome must guide the Greeks for their own good. The envoy counters gently but firmly that Greece has governed itself for centuries without Roman assistance. Historians still debate whether these discussions were sincere policy planning or simply social performances. In gatherings like this, decisions weren't always made outright, but reputations were shaped, alliances formed, and ideas sharpened like polished blades. You find yourself speaking with a woman who introduces herself as Livia. She is sharp-eyed, articulate, and clearly accustomed to being the smartest person in most rooms. She explains how Greek scholars have transformed education in Rome, bringing new ways of thinking, new methods of argument, new ideals of virtue. But, she adds, sipping her wine, Rome has its own strengths, efficiency, order, endurance. Perhaps the future belongs to whoever can combine Greek brilliance with Roman discipline. A nearby young man overhears and adds, or whoever can survive another round of Senate speeches. You laugh, because that's fair. The room grows warmer as more lamps are lit, conversations deepen, laughter rises. Someone begins reciting a Greek poem in a low, melodic voice. Another responds with a Roman verse that tries very hard to sound as elegant. The envoy looks tired but satisfied, having navigated yet another maze of subtle diplomacy. He nods toward the door, signaling it's time to leave, before the discussions become too bold or too wine-soaked to remain polite. You step back into the night. The air is cooler now. Stars scatter across the sky like distant campfires. Rome hums softly, quieter than during the day, but still alive. As you walk the silent streets with the envoy, you feel it again. Two cultures, walking side by side. Two worlds learning from one another. Two civilizations on the same road, but not for long. You follow the envoy back toward your lodging. The echo of philosophical laughter still drifting behind you. Morning arrives with a warm glow creeping through the shutters, turning the plastered walls of your lodging a soft, buttery gold. You inhale slowly, letting the faint scents of bread, oil lamps, and early sunlight ease you into wakefulness. Outside, Rome has already resumed its daily symphony hoofbeats on stone, vendors calling out, pots clattering, dogs barking as if they've been personally offended by the idea of mourning. The envoy knocks gently on your door, looking more alert than anyone should at this hour. His cloak is fastened, his expression tense. "We've received a message," he says quietly, "from Greece." You follow him downstairs to the atrium, where a young courier, dusty, sweating, breathing a little too dramatically, holds a wax-sealed tablet. His tunic is travel-worn, and his sandals look like they've had several philosophical arguments with the road. He wipes his forehead and extends the tablet toward the envoy, with the urgency of someone handing over a ticking amphora. The envoy breaks the seal, unrolls the message, and reads silently. His jaw tightens, his brow creases, his breaths grow slow and measured. Not panic, just the steady tightening of someone realizing the political landscape has shifted beneath his feet. You wait. The silence stretches. Finally, he looks up. "There has been a dispute in the north," he says. "A border skirmish. Greek cities are arguing again, and Rome is being asked to mediate." The major historical fact settles heavily in the room. Many Greek city-states, weakened by internal rivalries and exhausted from centuries of conflict, increasingly turned to Rome to settle disputes. It wasn't surrender, not yet, but it was dependence. Every request, every appeal, every invitation gave Rome another thread to hold. The courier clears his throat and explains what he heard. Two Greek factions clashed over land rights near a trade route. Both sides blame each other. Both sides insist they acted honorably. Both insist Rome will surely understand their version. The envoy sighs. It is the sigh of a man who has seen diplomacy unravel into chaos far too many times. One obscure tidbit whispers through your memory. In some regions of Greece, border disputes were once settled by sacred animal rituals, placing a goat between two lands and observing which side it walked toward. But those rituals faded as politics grew more complex. Now, instead of goats, they have Roman senators. You watch the envoy reread the message, his fingers tapping the tablet thoughtfully. "This changes everything," he murmurs. "Rome will see an opportunity. They always do." Historians still debate whether Rome intentionally encouraged Greek infighting to justify intervention, or whether the Greeks' own divisions simply made Rome the most convenient referee. Either way, the effect was the same. Invitations became influence. Influence became authority. Authority became control. The envoy stiffens. We must respond before Rome does. He strides to the table, gathers a quill, and begins composing a reply on fresh wax. He dictates aloud, voice steady. "To our honored allies, remain calm. Avoid escalation. Rome must not be given cause to intervene without Greek guidance." He pauses, frowns, scratches out a line with the flat end of the stylus, rewrites it with more care. After several minutes, the message is sealed and pressed into the courier's hands, along with a small pouch of coins that appear to be both payment and apology for how fast he'll need to run. Once the courier rushes off, the envoy sinks onto a low bench. "We must move carefully," he says. "If Rome decides to mediate, they will not limit themselves to advice. They never do." But it's not fear in his voice, just the weary clarity of someone watching the tide rise inch by inch. He stands. "Walk with me." You follow him outside, where the morning light spills softly through the narrow street. Rome is waking in layers, children sweeping doorsteps, shopkeepers lifting wooden shutters, bakers carrying fresh loaves that steam in the chilly air. As you move through these familiar streets, the envoy speaks in low tones. "Greece has always argued. It is in our blood. We debate, we challenge, we resist simplicity." He smiles faintly. "But Rome? Rome thrives on clarity, on hierarchy, on the belief that disagreement can be solved with structure." He stops near a statue of a Roman general, broad-shouldered, confident, carved with the unmistakable certainty of victory. Pigeons perch on the statue's head, wholly undermining the intended intimidation. The envoy gestures toward it. "They see conflict as a door," he says, "and they always walk through." A group of Roman officials passes you, speaking briskly. You hear fragments, mentions of the conflict, mentions of stability, mentions of guidance. The envoy stiffens. They already know. Rome's information networks move fast. The sun climbs higher. The city seems to inhale collectively, as if bracing for a new shift in its relationship with Greece. You continue walking, feeling the weight of a moment that is quiet but monumental, like the first tremor before an earthquake. This is how conquests often begin. Not with a battle, but with an invitation. Not with swords, but with scrolls. Not with noise, but with silence. You glance at the envoy. He meets your gaze, determination sharpening his features. "We have much to do," he says. The envoy leads you through a quieter district of Rome, where the streets widen, just enough to give the impression of order, without ever fully escaping the city's layered chaos. The sun filters through tall cypress trees that line a long avenue, their shadows stretching like dark, elegant fingers across the stone. The hum of the forum fades behind you, replaced by softer sounds, women drawing water, a distant clatter of carpenters' tools, the steady rhythm of your own footsteps. A young boy runs past, carrying a basket of figs. He glances over his shoulder, trips, and nearly spills them, before catching himself with the grace of someone who's made this mistake before. He offers you a sheepish grin before darting off again. Rome is full of motion, full of stories, full of people who have learned to navigate its rhythm with instinctive confidence. The envoy stops, outside a villa with high walls and an intricately carved wooden door. Ivy cascades down its stone facade. Two servants stand at attention, greeting him with a practiced combination of warmth and suspicion, the standard Roman welcome for foreign dignitaries. "This," the envoy whispers, "is where they extend Roman hospitality. Make no mistake, every cup of wine comes with a question." Inside, the villa opens into a spacious atrium lit by sunbeams streaming through a central roof opening. At its center sits a shallow pool with floating rose petals. The air smells faintly of myrtle and polished marble. Voices echo from deeper inside, low, calm, deliberately measured. A Roman official approaches, his toga draped impeccably, his smile wide in the way only diplomatic smiles are. He greets the envoy in polished Greek, a clear sign of respect, but also of subtle psychological one-upmanship. Nothing says, We admire your culture, like using it better than you expected. They are honored to welcome you, he says, gesturing toward a set of couches arranged around a low table. Platters of figs, nuts, olives, and honey cakes are arranged artfully, as if diplomacy tastes better when garnished. You take a seat beside the envoy. Servants pour watered wine into clay cups, each bowl painted with neat geometric designs. The wine is sweet, chilled slightly by being stored in a terracotta jar that had rested in a shaded corner of the villa. The major historical fact reveals itself as conversation begins. Romans used hospitality strategically. A well-fed guest was an agreeable guest. A comfortable guest was a willing ally. Many political relationships in the ancient world began not in senate chambers or battlefield tents, but on couches like these, surrounded by olives and polite questions. The official leans forward. We've heard troubling news from the north, he says lightly, as though commenting on the weather. Is it true your cities are quarreling? Again? The envoy nods with cautious diplomacy. A misunderstanding, he says. Nothing that requires Roman intervention. The official's brows lift in polite disbelief. Surely, assistance from a friend would not be unwelcome. In the pause that follows, you hear distant laughter from the courtyard, a pair of children racing around a fountain, splashing each other with water. The moment is domestic, harmless, grounding. But here, in this room, the air feels heavier. The envoy chooses his words carefully. We appreciate Rome's concern, he begins. But Greece must solve Greek disputes. That is how it has always been. One obscure tidbit. Greek diplomats often practiced measured silence, the art of pausing meaningfully to let others fill the space, revealing more than they intended. The envoy uses it now, lowering his cup, waiting. The Roman official shifts, recalibrating. Historians still debate how sincere Roman offers of assistance were. Some scholars argue Rome truly believed it was stabilizing the Mediterranean. Others see a more calculated pattern responses crafted to seem benevolent, while gradually increasing Roman authority. Today, sitting in this villa, you can feel the subtle gravity of Roman ambition, polished, courteous, relentless. The official smiles again, smooth as silk. We would never intrude where we are not requested, he says. But we also cannot ignore chaos. Stability benefits all. It is a masterful sentence, gentle, vague, and full of implied consequences. The envoy counters with Greek poise. Stability begins with understanding, not with intervention. A brief stillness lingers between them. Then the host claps his hands lightly. Come, he says, rising, let us walk the gardens. Perhaps the fresh air will ease the weight of politics. You follow him through a columned walkway into a lush courtyard, where rosemary bushes grow in tidy rows, and lemon trees hang heavy with fruit. A small fountain gurgles at the center, its water sparkling in the sunlight. Here, the official's tone softens. He points toward the horizon. Rome expands, yes, he admits quietly, but not to conquer, to protect, to prevent the world from fracturing into endless quarrels. The envoy regards him with a mixture of admiration and unease. Rome believes in its mission. Greece believes in its independence. And the distance between those beliefs grows narrower by the day. A breeze stirs the lemon leaves. Somewhere beyond the walls, Rome's heartbeat continues steady, ambitious, unstoppable. The envoy's shoulders tighten. We must return, he says. And as you leave the villa, stepping from perfumed air back into the dusty street, you feel the shift again. History is tightening its grip. The road ahead is changing shape. And you walk on, deeper into the story. The sun climbs higher, warming the stone streets until they glow pale gold beneath your feet. After the heavy conversations in the villa, the envoy leads you through a bustling square toward a set of arched buildings topped with red tiles. Steam drifts like thin, ghostly ribbons from vents in the roof. Voices echo from within, laughter, debate, singing, the unmistakable sloshing of water. You've arrived at the baths, a place where Romans wash, relax, and most importantly talk. If the Senate is where politics are declared, the baths are where politics are born. You pass through a wide entrance, where attendants stand ready with baskets for clothes, and a practiced expression of polite detachment. The air inside is warm and moist. The scent of oils, rosemary, lavender, myrtle, mingles with the mineral tang of hot water. The changing room is a flurry of half-dressed men trying very hard not to slip on the polished floor. One drops his sandal and watches it skid across the room. Another boasts loudly about having learned a Greek poem, only to forget every word halfway through reciting it. One obscure tidbit: Roman bathhouses sometimes hired slaves whose sole job was to oil and scrape bathers' skin with a curved tool called a strigil. They accomplished this with alarming enthusiasm. Today, several attendants stand ready, holding strigils like small, intimidating trophies. You enter the warm water pool with a grateful sigh. Heat envelopes your muscles, tension melts from your shoulders. The surface ripples gently as bathers shift, sink, and stretch. The envoy settles beside you, eyes half closed, exhaustion curling softly around him. Around you, conversations bloom like floating petals. Two merchants argue about grain prices. A philosopher corrects another man's pronunciation of a Greek word, desperately hoping someone will ask him for more details. Nobody does. A soldier boasts about the strenuous training he endured this morning, though the way he winces suggests the stairs inside nearly defeated him. The major historical fact floats to the surface as naturally as the steam. Public baths were hubs of information. News travelled here faster than through messengers. Gossip, rumours, and political insights slipped between the pools like minnows. If you wanted to understand Rome, not the marble, not the armies, but the people, you came to the baths. Near the far edge of the pool, a group of men converse in lowered voices. One of them glances at your envoy with a mixture of recognition and curiosity. After a moment, they beckon him over. The envoy hesitates, then motions for you to follow. You wade closer, the warm water swirling around your legs. Word is spreading, one man says, leaning in. His voice is low, steady. About the Greek disputes. Another nods. Some senators think Rome should step in immediately. Others believe intervention should wait for more. Justification. A third man, older, wrinkles his nose. Justification always appears when Rome needs it, like mushrooms after rain. The envoy listens, expression unreadable. He asks careful questions, nothing direct, but each inquiry sharpened by urgency. The men answer with cautious honesty, understanding the delicate dance between diplomacy and discretion. Historians still debate whether Roman intervention in Greek affairs was driven by opportunism or by genuine belief in their role as stabilizers. But here, in these pools, you hear the truth from the voices who live beneath the marble politics. Rome is curious. Rome is impatient. Rome is considering its move. The conversation shifts when a younger man drifts over, dripping water everywhere. Have you heard? He asks breathlessly. Rome may send a delegation to observe matters firsthand, just to make sure Greece isn't mismanaging itself. The envoy stiffens. Then the young man shrugs. Maybe it's just talk. Everything is talk here. You move toward the farth edge, where an attendant offers a small cup of fragrant wine cooled in snow brought down from the mountains. You sip it smooth, sweet, deliciously unexpected. One more quiet luxury. Afterward, you follow the envoy into the caldarium, the hot room. Steam thickens the air so much you can barely see your own hands. The heat wraps around you like a blanket woven from sunlight. Breathing becomes a slow, deliberate act. Somewhere, someone hums a lullaby. The envoy sinks onto a marble bench, sweat beading on his brow. Rome is preparing, he says softly. Even if they deny it, you nod. You've seen it too, at the Senate, at the villa, even here among half-naked men with strigils. A subtle, tightening curiosity, a readiness. Yet the envoy isn't discouraged. If anything, his eyes sharpen with renewed purpose. We must return to Greece soon, he says, before Rome decides to follow us. You leave the baths through a cold plunge pool that shocks your senses awake. Water is frigid, biting, electric. You surface with a gasp that earns a laugh from an old man who has clearly mastered this ritual decades ago. Wrapping yourself in a cloth, you step back into the open air. The cool breeze brushes your damp skin, making you feel weightless for a moment. Rome hums around you, lively, powerful, watchful. The envoy tightens his cloak. We have no time to waste. And together, you walk toward the harbor road, where new uncertainties wait like waves gathering strength. You step outside the bathhouse, into the brightness of late afternoon, the sunlight reflecting off puddles left by bathers who walked out dripping and unbothered. The heat has softened, replaced by a warm breeze that carries the scent of baked clay, pine resin, and freshly ground grain from a nearby mill. Rome feels alive again, its earlier intensity now mellowed into a gentler hum. The envoy walks quickly, cloak fluttering behind him, sandals slapping against the pavement with the urgency of a man who has just learned the clock is ticking. You follow him through streets that twist and widen unpredictably, built more for function than for elegance. Children run between buildings, chasing a stick with wheels. A dog trots proudly with a loaf of stolen bread, pursued by a baker waving a rolling pin. Life continues, oblivious to the diplomatic tremors unfolding. The envoy stops near a shaded fountain. He splashes his face, then leans over the water, breathing deeply. "We leave tomorrow," he says, voice steady but tight. "Tonight, we gather information. As much as we can." You nod, though your legs would prefer a nap. But history rarely schedules itself conveniently. The two of you weave through the heart of the city, past food stalls, where cooks flip flatbreads over hot stones, past blacksmiths pounding iron into tools that will outlive their owners, past groups of men playing dice with the serious intensity of philosophers debating the cosmos. Near the edge of the forum, you notice a small crowd gathered around a man standing on a crate. He waves a scroll dramatically, shouting news at anyone who will listen. His voice is theatrical, his gestures even more so. "Disputes in northern Greece," he announces. "Rumors of instability. Rome must take action." The crowd murmurs, some agreeing, others rolling their eyes so hard you think they might injure something. A group of young Romans nearby imitates the speaker behind his back, pretending to read scrolls upside down for comedic effect. One obscure tidbit: professional news criers like this often exaggerated events to gain attention. They were the ancient equivalent of breaking news, banners loud, dramatic, and sometimes wildly inaccurate. The envoy listens closely, though you can see the frustration tightening the corners of his mouth. "We must leave before rumors become mandates," he murmurs. You continue toward the outskirts of the city, where the buildings grow smaller and the air cooler. On a hill overlooking the Tiber River, a group of Roman soldiers practice drill shields, locking together like a moving wall, spears thrusting forward in perfect rhythm. Dust rises around them, like a cloud of determination. The major historical fact stands here with startling clarity. Rome's military discipline was unlike anything Greece had ever faced. Greek armies were fierce, proud, well-trained but often disjointed, bound to cities rather than a unified nation. Rome drilled relentlessly, moved as one, and believed deeply in structure. Watching these soldiers, you understand why Rome would eventually reshape the Mediterranean. The envoy watches too, silently. His expression shifts: admiration, worry, resignation, all tangled together. "If Rome decides to intervene," he says softly, "Greece will have no choice but to negotiate or bend." You walk on. At the riverbank, a row of merchant ships rocks gently against the docks, hulls creaking to each wave. Sailors unload amphorae of oil and wine, stacking them with practiced ease. A fisherman sits nearby, carving small figures into driftwood, tiny gods, tiny horses, tiny ships. One looks like a lopsided dolphin wearing a crown. You point to it. He shrugs. People like strange things. The envoy asks several sailors about ship departures. Most shrug or shake their heads. One says tomorrow, depending on the wind. Another says maybe in 2 days, depending on the mood of his crew. A third says he won't sail until he stops hiccuping, which could take hours or possibly the rest of his life. Historians still debate how reliable ancient shipping schedules were, but the consensus is they weren't. Wind, weather, crew moods, omen readings, everything had a say. Planning was less about precision and more about optimism. You and the envoy stopped to eat near the harbour, bread still warm from the oven, olives soaked in herbs, a wedge of sharp cheese. The envoy barely tastes his food, mind racing through diplomatic calculations. Rome may send observers, he mutters. Observers become advisors. Advisors become organizers. Organizers become decision-makers. The breeze lifts strands of his hair. You hear distant gulls. The river shimmers under the setting sun, its surface glowing like liquid gold. As evening settles, lanterns flicker to life along the streets. Traders pack up their stalls. Children are called home. Dogs curl beneath carts. The sky blushes pink, then deepens to purple. You begin walking back toward your lodging house. The envoy speaks quietly, almost to himself. "We came to negotiate peace," he says. "But Rome sees opportunity. And Greece is giving them openings." He pauses beneath a fig tree, its large leaves rustling like soft whispers. "If we leave tomorrow," he says, "we may still shape the outcome." The moon rises a pale silver disk above Rome's rooftops. The air cools. The world slows. You return to the lodging house, the weight of the day settling into your bones. The envoy retires quickly, preparing for the next morning's departure. You lay on your mat, listening to faint street noises, the creak of carts, murmured conversation, distant laughter. Rome breathes around you, and somewhere out there, across the sea, Greece waits unsteady, divided, unaware of how close history is pressing. Tomorrow, you return. But tonight, you rest. Morning arrives in Rome with a pale silver light that seeps through the shutters like a whispered reminder of unfinished business. The city stirs slowly this time, quieter than usual, as if giving you a gentler farewell. You gather your things with deliberate calm, though a faint vibration of urgency hums beneath your ribs. Outside, the air is cool enough to raise a pleasant shiver. Dew clings to the roofs of insulae, glistening in the dawn. The envoy meets you at the doorway, cloak fastened, expression sharpened by purpose but softened by fatigue. He hands you a small parcel of bread and olives, breakfast on the move. "We must reach the docks before the wind changes," he mutters. Rome loves delays. You follow him through hushed streets where only bakers and milk sellers are awake. A thin curtain of mist drifts along the ground, almost dreamlike. For a moment, you hear nothing but your own footsteps and the faint call of a rooster determined to wake all of Italy. Turning a corner, you pass a shrine to the household gods. A woman kneels before it, lighting a small oil lamp. She glances up, nods, and returns to her quiet ritual. One obscure tidbit. Roman travelers sometimes whispered a quick request to Lares Viales, guardian spirits of the road, before setting out. The envoy, normally so composed, pauses just long enough to murmur something under his breath. You pretend not to notice. As you approach the Tiber, Rome slowly gains volume. Carts creak, dogs bark, men shout greetings to one another across the riverbank. Fishermen haul in nets with the weary grace of men who have repeated the same motions for decades. The major historical fact arrives with the sight of the river itself. Rome's access to waterways made it the beating heart of Mediterranean trade. The Tiber funneled goods from inland territories to the coast, where they travelled onward across the sea. Rome's power grew not only by conquest, but by constant movement. Grain, wine, timber, information, people, everything passed through Rome. And now, so do you. The harbour is already alive with activity. Crews shout orders, wooden crates thump onto docks, sailcloth snaps in the morning breeze. A group of sailors argue about whether the sky looks promising or disastrous, a debate resolved only when a gull drops something unfortunate onto one man's shoulder. "That's a blessing," another sailor says seriously. "No," the man replies. "No, it's not." The envoy scans the docks, searching for the ship, scheduled loosely, tentatively, hypothetically, to sail for Greece today. Eventually he spots a medium-sized merchant vessel with a painted boar on its prow and a captain who looks like he's prepared to complain for the entire journey. Historians still debate whether ancient captains were genuinely superstitious or simply used omens as excuses to delay departure. Today's captain cites temperamental winds and ominous seagull behavior before finally being persuaded by a bribe that could soften even the sternest omen. As you prepare to board, a young Roman official approaches, short tunic, sharp haircut, scroll in hand. He greets the envoy with two bright eyes and a tone that suggests he's practicing sounding important. "Leaving so soon?" he asks. The envoy gives a diplomatic smile. "Greece needs clarity." The official nods. Rome is considering sending observers, purely for the sake of stability. Ah, there it is. The envoy keeps his composure, but you see the calculation flicker in his eyes. If observers come, he replies calmly, let them remember that Greece listens more when approached with respect. The official answers with a politician's smile, pleasant, empty, polished. Of course, respect above all. Historians still debate whether these early observers were meant as advisors or as gentle instruments of control. From the subtle weight of the official's tone, you suspect the latter. The official wishes you safe travels, then disappears into the growing crowd of the port. The envoy lets out a breath he's been holding since yesterday. We must arrive before Rome's messengers, he whispers, before Rome's intentions become actions. You climb aboard the ship, feeling the deck shift beneath your sandals. Sailors move quickly, securing ropes and adjusting the sail. The captain shouts commands with theatrical grumpiness. The wind picks up, not strong, but steady enough for departure. The ship pushes away from the dock. Rome retreats. The city's rooftops glow in the sunrise, their edges trimmed with warm gold. Smoke curls lazily from chimneys. The capital rises like a proud guardian above it all. For a brief moment, it feels peaceful, too peaceful for a city quietly reshaping the fate of the Mediterranean. As the distance widens, you feel something else. Relief, tinged with apprehension. Greece lies ahead. Greece, with its beauty and brilliance and stubborn pride. Greece, still arguing, still dreaming, still unaware of the storm it has unknowingly invited. The envoy stands beside you, watching Rome shrink. Remember this moment, he says softly. The moment when things still seem salvageable. You turn your face to the wind. The sea opens before you like a vast, shimmering road. And once again, you sail toward history. The voyage back toward Greece begins in a hush. The kind of hush that settles over a ship when every person aboard senses that the world they left behind will not be the same when they return. The sea is calmer today, its surface rippling like silk brushed by a gentle hand. The sky is a soft blue, cloudless, wide, as if offering you a clean slate that you absolutely know you will not be granted. You lean against the railing. Salt spray cools your skin. The rhythmic push of the waves lulls the ship into a slow, steady sway. It feels almost meditative, almost serene until you catch the expression on the envoy's face. His eyes scan the horizon with the intensity of someone expecting fate itself to rise out of the water. Sailors move around the deck, performing their tasks with surprising coordination. One hums a tune about a fisherman who married a sea nymph. Another mutters to himself while retying a knot for the 5th time, insisting the wind has been acting shady all morning. A third sailor tries to teach a gull to perch on his shoulder. The gull declines with aggressive disappointment. You sit beside a pile of coiled rope, chewing on the last of your travel bread, which tastes exactly like every bread you have ever eaten on a ship. Slightly salty, extremely comforting, faintly suspicious. The envoy approaches with a tightly sealed wax tablet. A report from a passing merchant vessel, he says. News travels faster than sails. You raise an eyebrow. He hands you the tablet. Inside is a brief but alarming summary. The dispute in northern Greece has escalated. What began as a border argument has turned into a standoff. 2 cities have armed their militias. A third has taken sides. A fourth insists it has no intentions of choosing sides, but is loudly preparing its armor anyway. And most concerning rumors say Roman emissaries have already left Italy. The envoy's jaw tightens. We must reach the port before they do. The major historical fact becomes painfully clear. Greek conflicts had a habit of inviting larger powers to the table, intentionally or not. For centuries, rival city-states clashed over borders, resources, pride. But now, with Rome's shadow growing larger each season, these same disputes are no longer isolated. They are opportunities, doorways, and Rome is very good at walking through doorways. Hours pass. The ship glides across the open water. The sun climbs overhead and warms the back of your neck. The sailors begin betting on how soon they'll see land. Their guesses range from a few hours to a few hours after the sea stops being so dramatic. One obscure tidbit: ancient sailors sometimes kept small pouches of colored sand from their homeland to sprinkle onto foreign soil when they arrived, introducing themselves spiritually before stepping foot. Today, You see one sailor pull out such a pouch and shake it experimentally. "Just in case," he says. By late afternoon, the first faint outline of land appears, mountains, rising like blue shadows from the sea. The envoy straightens. You feel your stomach flutter, not from seasickness, but from the weight of the moment. Greece is ahead. Home. Yes, but home changed by distance, by tension, by the looming presence of Rome. The coastline grows clearer. Rocky cliffs, clusters of whitewashed houses clinging to hillsides, groves of olive trees shimmering in the slanting light. The ship angles toward a familiar harbor, one you passed through not so long ago. But the mood is different now. Tighter, heavier. As the vessel approaches the dock, you see crowds gathered not with excitement, but with worry. Fishermen stand with arms crossed. Merchants whisper in tight circles. Even the goats seem unusually attentive, which is perhaps the most concerning detail of all. Historians still debate whether ordinary Greeks understood the full implications of Roman involvement at this early stage, but the unease in these faces suggests that, even without details, people sense something shifting in the wind. The ship bumps gently against the dock, ropes fly, sailors call, "Out." You descend the plank with the envoy, the air warm and thick with tension. A group of local officials rushes forward, robes askew, hair uncombed, expressions strained. "You've returned," one gasps. "Tell us everything," another urges. But the envoy shakes his head. "No, you must tell me. What has happened?" They exchange glances. Then one speaks, voice low. "There has been fighting in the north. Small, but real." Another adds, "Both sides expect help." A third murmurs, "And some hope that help comes from Rome." The envoy closes his eyes briefly, exhaling slowly. You feel it in your bones. The shift, the pivot, the moment when history leans forward. The crowd thickens around you, faces lined with worry, voices whispering, rumors swirling like dust in a sunbeam. You've returned to Greece. But the Greece you left is already slipping away. And ahead lies the beginning of the conflict that will reshape everything you've seen, everything you've walked through, everything you've gently drifted into. The envoy touches your arm. "We must go," he says. And once again, you follow him, this time into a Greece, preparing for consequences it cannot yet imagine. The moment your sandals touch the familiar Greek soil, the air feels different, thicker, charged, like the atmosphere before a summer storm. The breeze carries the smell of olives and dust, but also something sharper, tension sharpened into a scent. You walk through the port town with the envoy, weaving between anxious citizens, raised voices, and the kind of hurried footsteps that suggest everyone is preparing for something unnamed but inevitable. Greece is awake, and not in a peaceful way. The envoy gathers the local officials beneath the shade of a thin awning behind a tavern. Their faces are pale from worry and sun. A jug of water sits on the table, forgotten. A map is unfurled between them, weighed down with stones so it doesn't flap in the restless wind. One official points to a mark northward. It started here, only a dispute over grazing land, an argument, a push, a shove. He hesitates, then a spear. Another official adds, "It escalated by accident. It always does." His voice is tired, as if history has been repeating itself in front of him for decades. You can feel it. A familiar Greek story unfolding again, two proud cities, too stubborn to yield, too proud to ask for help, and far too quick to pick up weapons when words fail. Then comes the part that twists a chill along your spine. A messenger steps forward, dust-caked, eyes wide. "I saw Roman sails on the horizon." The envoy freezes. The major historical fact falls into place with the clarity of a dropped amphora. Rome did not conquer Greece all at once. It seeped in. Invitations, mediation, alliances formed during disputes. One city called Rome for help, then another, then another. And each time, Rome came not as a conqueror, at first, but as a problem solver whose presence lingered long after the problems were solved, or not solved. The envoy dismisses the officials gently and turns to you. "We must go inland," he says. Now, before Rome steps foot on a Greek dock. The path winds through rocky hillsides and scattered olive groves. Cicadas sing with relentless enthusiasm, as if unaware of the diplomatic dread echoing between your steps. Shepherds watch warily as you pass, their flocks clustered more tightly than usual, as though even sheep sense the unrest. In the first inland town, word has already spread. A crowd gathers around you and the envoy, voices overlapping in frantic waves. Is Rome coming? Whose side will they take? Do they bring soldiers? Will they help us? Will they help them? Fear and hope mingle in equal parts. Impossible to tell apart. One obscure tidbit whispers through the crowd. Some villages burn certain herbs, sage, bay, oregano, as offerings to keep conflict away. Today, thin trails of herbal smoke drift from several doorways, curling upward like pleas sent to the sky. The envoy stands on a stone step, raising his hands for silence, not loudly, but with authority that comes from exhaustion and conviction. Listen, he calls. Greece must remain calm. We cannot invite Rome into our disagreements. Once they enter, they do not leave. A murmur ripples through the crowd. But the fighting, someone starts. We handle our own disputes, the envoy insists. Always. Historians still debate whether Greek communities at this time truly believed unity was possible. Records show fragmented identities, loyalty to city-states over nation, pride over compromise. But moments like this reveal the truth. Even when unity was necessary, it was painfully difficult. You walk with the envoy from town to town, hearing variations of the same desperate questions. Some cities prepare militias, others draft envoys of their own. One town elder suggests settling the dispute with a poetry contest. Nobody else thinks this is a good idea, but he is proud of it anyway. As you continue, the sky darkens not with storm clouds, but with the late dusk settling over the hills. Lamps flicker to life one by one. The road becomes a ribbon of cool shadow beneath your feet. In a quiet valley, you come across something unexpected. A group of young men practicing phalanx formations with wooden spears. Their movements are earnest but sloppy. Their lines waver. A grey-bearded veteran paces before them, shouting corrections. "What are you preparing for?" the envoy asks. "We don't know," one of the young men admits, "but it feels like something is coming." You feel that too. Not in the air, not on the horizon, but in the silence between questions, in the weight of worried glances, in the hurried steps of messengers, in the tightening knot of history. As night deepens, you and the envoy reach a hillside overlooking a cluster of distant campfires. The fires flicker in two separate groups, two cities preparing for conflict. The envoy exhales slowly. If Rome reaches them before we do, they will accept Roman judgment. He doesn't say the rest, but you hear it anyway. And once they do, Rome's influence will anchor itself here. Quietly at first, then firmly, then irrevocably. A single owl hoots in the dark. A breeze stirs the grass. Far across the valley, someone shouts, a sound sharp enough to make you tense. The envoy turns to you, determination etched deep. "We cannot let the flames spread," he says. "Tomorrow, we speak to both sides." You nod. Tonight, you rest beside a small fire. Tomorrow, you step into the trembling center of Greek pride, Greek fear, Greek stubbornness. And behind it all, you feel it. Rome is coming. Dawn unfolds slowly in the valley, as if reluctant to reveal what the night has left behind. Pale light spills over the hills and reveals the two encampments below two small cities, alike in pride and temper, now divided by a stretch of rocky ground and several generations' worth of grudges. Smoke rises from cooking fires on both sides. The smell of barley porridge and wood ash mingles with the scent of distant pine. The envoy stands beside you on the ridge, cloak wrapped tightly against the early chill. His expression is calm on the surface, but you've come to recognize the tension beneath the tightness in his jaw, the way his fingertips drum lightly against his thigh. He exhales. "We start with the nearer camp," he says, though his tone suggests he would rather start with breakfast. Together, you descend toward the first encampment tents scattered across uneven ground, men sharpening spears that look more ceremonial than deadly, women carrying water with composed determination, children peeking out from behind, woven tent flaps with wide, curious eyes. A dog sniffs suspiciously at your sandals, then decides you are not interesting enough to bark at. A bearded militia leader approaches. He looks like he hasn't slept, and like he's prepared to blame sleep deprivation on anything except stress. "You've returned from Rome," he says, more accusation than greeting. The envoy nods. "To prevent this from becoming something worse." The man snorts. "It wouldn't have come to this if they hadn't crossed the boundary first." He jabs a thumb toward the far camp, where small silhouettes move like restless ghosts in the morning haze. The envoy gently unrolls a map. "Boundaries," he says, "are only lines on paper. Agreements are what matter. Your cities made one together." The man folds his arms, unimpressed. "Yes, but they broke it." The major historical fact settles over this exchange like dust. Greek disagreements often began small, but escalated quickly, because honor, pride, and autonomy mattered deeply. City-states were like extended families, unyielding, sensitive, fiercely protective, and absolutely convinced they were the reasonable ones. You walk with the leader through the camp. Men train with wooden weapons, practicing stances they learned from fathers, who learned them from fathers, who learned them from someone who once claimed to know a Spartan. A young fighter tries to look intimidating, but sneezes dramatically, completely ruining the effect. One obscure tidbit emerges naturally. Many Greek militias used local musicians to maintain marching rhythm. Today, a man stands beside a pair of drums, tapping out patterns that sound like someone arguing politely with percussion. As you finish speaking with the leaders, the envoy pulls you aside. "They won't back down unless the other side steps first," he murmurs. "And the other side will certainly say the same." You glance toward the second camp. Smoke rises in thicker plumes now. The air feels tighter. You walk across the valley slowly, carefully. Men from the second camp follow your movements with narrowed eyes, gripping their spears just tightly enough for emphasis. One snarls at a rooster wandering dangerously close to their grain sacks. The rooster, unbothered, continues strutting with heroic confidence. The leaders here greet you with a similar mix of defensiveness and exhaustion. "They crossed the border," one insists. "We only responded." The envoy responds calmly, evenly. "Did you try speaking first?" The leader scoffs. "Speaking? They stole our livestock." In the distance, a goat bleats with what might be guilt or indigestion. Hard to tell. The envoy attempts reasoning, reframing, gentle pressure. But the second city mirrors the first hurt pride, fear of appearing weak, certainty that backing down invites humiliation. The cycle is painfully familiar. Historians still debate whether diplomacy between Greek city-states could ever have prevented Rome's rise. Some scholars claim unity was impossible. Others believe a single, well-timed alliance might have changed everything. Here, standing between two stubborn fires, you feel the truth leaning toward the former. As the envoy finishes negotiations, a horn blast echoes from the hills, sharp, distant, carried on a rising wind. The militia leaders stiffen. A messenger sprints into view, out of breath, dust coating his hair. "They're coming!" he gasps. Roman observers 3 ships, nearly at the southern cape. A silence falls heavy over the valley. The envoy closes his eyes for a moment. Grief, frustration, inevitability, all simmering together. "They've moved faster than I expected," he whispers. And then louder. "We still have time. We must act now." He strides between the two camps as the sun climbs higher, gathering intensity. You follow him back and forth, watching him speak with groups from both sides, urging restraint, urging cooperation, urging silence. His voice rises, falls, reshapes itself depending on the audience, sometimes gentle, sometimes firm, sometimes nearly pleading. Some listen, some don't. Some shout over him, some look away. And slowly, painfully, the truth dawns. Rome will not arrive to find peace. Rome will arrive to find a problem. And Rome solves problems, permanently. As the afternoon light sharpens, you stand once more on the ridge between the camps. The valley feels like a bowl holding 2 simmering tempers. Down in the south, the glint of sails flashes like knives in the sunlight. The envoy grips the ridge's dry grass. "We're out of time," he says softly. "The Roman ships are coming. The cities are still divided. And the storm that will reshape Greece is nearly upon you. Tomorrow, everything will change. The Roman ships appear on the southern horizon as pale triangles of white, cutting cleanly through the blue of the sea. Even from the ridge, you can see their sails swell with purpose. They move with that unmistakable Roman rhythm. Efficient, steady, confident. The wind seems to favor them. The waves part willingly. History, as always, makes room. The envoy stands beside you, cloak snapping sharply in the rising wind. His face is calm, but his breathing is shallow. "We speak together," he says quietly. "Both cities. If they stand united even briefly, Rome may hesitate. It is a fragile hope, but it is something." You descend into the valley once more, walking the dirt path that now feels heavier beneath your sandals. Dust swirls around your steps. The sun hangs high, bright and sharp, casting short shadows that cling close to the ground, as if even the light refuses to leave your side. The leaders of both camps stand at the center of the field, facing one another like wary wolves called to a temporary truce. The envoy steps between them. His voice is steady, controlled, urgent. "Rome is coming because we invited them," he says. Not with a message, but with division. With pride, with shouting, with fear. But if Rome arrives to see unity, any unity, they cannot claim to solve what is already mended. The leaders exchange glances. Hard ones, long ones, full of stubbornness and exhaustion, and that old Greek ache for honor that always sits just beneath the ribs. One of them, finally, speaks. "What do you propose?" "That you greet Rome together," the envoy says. "As equals, as partners, as Greeks, not as enemies." A silence stretches like drawn bowstring. Then, slowly, miraculously, both leaders nod. It isn't reconciliation, not really, but it's a moment, a breath, a chance. You walk with the envoy as the combined group moves southward across the valley. Dust rises around their feet, shields glint, spears tap against stone, not in battle formation, just in weary, reluctant choreography. But then you see them. The Roman delegation steps onto Greek soil. 3 officials, a handful of soldiers, a translator, and behind them, like shadows waiting their turn, more ships anchoring in the bay. One obscure tidbit floats through your mind. Roman observers often arrived with smaller escorts at first, to appear non-threatening. The larger forces always came later. Quietly, gradually, inevitably. The envoy steps forward. He speaks with flawless clarity, offering unity, cooperation, a plan to solve the dispute internally. The 2 Greek leaders stand beside him, silent but aligned. The Roman envoy listens, nods politely, smiles thinly. Historians still debate whether Rome ever truly considered stepping back in moments like this, or whether all roads had already been paved toward what would follow. But as you watch the Roman envoy speak calm, sympathetic, inexorable, you feel the tide pulling, even as everyone pretends to negotiate. When it ends, the Roman envoy gives a gentle bow. "We will observe only," he says. "But you know the truth." Observation is the first step of ownership. As the Romans walk back toward their camp, the Greek leaders disperse with tight jaws and unsteady breaths. The envoy stands alone, staring at the footprints left in the dust. "Today," he says softly, "we delayed it, but we did not stop it." He turns to you, eyes heavy with the weight of inevitability. Rome has entered Greece. A breeze stirs the valley grass, and the long conquest begins not with swords, but with footsteps. The day settles into a warm, amber glow as the sun drifts lower, stretching long, gentle shadows across the quieting valley. The tension that held the air so tightly begins to loosen now, like a fist unclenching after too many hours of strain. You breathe in slowly, and the world seems to exhale with you, soft, steady, easing into the stillness of evening. The camps behind you quiet down, voices soften into murmurs, like distant waves rolling to shore. Fires flicker calmly, no longer signaling anger or fear, but simple human warmth, the glow of people gathering for food, for rest, for one more night of ordinary life beneath the sky. Above, the first stars appear, pinpricking the deepening blue. They shimmer faintly at first, then brighter, as if waking gently from daylight's heavy hand. The air cools, the breeze slows. The cicadas soften their rhythm until even their song becomes a low, steady hum that blends into everything else. You stand on the hillside, watching dusk fold itself carefully across the land. The grass moves in slow waves. The sky drifts through shades of peach, rose, lavender, then deeper blue. Nothing rushes, nothing demands. The world simply unwinds, piece by piece. Beside you, the envoy lowers himself onto a smooth stone and closes his eyes not in defeat, not even in sorrow, but in a weary acceptance. History moves slowly, he whispers, until the moment it doesn't. But for now, there is no movement at all. Only calm. Only breath. Only the soft, grounding weight of the earth beneath you and the quiet sky above you. You let your shoulders sink, let your thoughts drift. Let the day dissolve into a peaceful, timeless hush. The story rests here, and so do you.